Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to episode 94 of the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from OSCON here in Portland, Oregon, and we're here today with Mark Collier, COO of the OpenStack Foundation, correct?
That's right.
And Wayne Walls, Cloud Strategist at Rackspace. You've got a cool title, dude.
Thanks. I got to pick it myself.
And we're here to talk a little bit today about OpenStack really turning 3 and OpenStack as a foundation and a project versus more of a product. Mm-hmm. And so first of all, Mark, how are you doing? And kind of give a little introduction.
Sure. I'm doing great. So as you mentioned, Aaron, I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the OpenStack Foundation. And prior to that, was involved with OpenStack from the early days, helping to get it off the ground with a bunch of other folks throughout the industry. And, the foundation really only launched back in September, so less than a year ago. And at that time, we were kind of blown away by the fact that we had over 5,000 members had already signed up and were interested in joining. And now, less than a year later, we've almost doubled that. We're over 10,000 members, which is really incredible to me. And we have members in over 120 countries. And I think if there's one thing that's just gets me more excited than any other data point, it's that, because we've just had a bunch of celebrations all around the world from dozens of different user groups, and we'll be showing putting some of those photos online soon so you can see all the celebrations. But when you see people in Indonesia and just all over the world that are excited and pouring their heart and soul into OpenStack and they're members of the foundation, that's pretty exciting, and less than a year from just the launch of that as an independent entity.
Awesome. And Wayne, so you don't work on the Rackspace hybrid cloud team, or do you? And tell me what your deal is,
what
man.
What would you say you do here?
What do you do, man? Justify your existence. Go.
Yeah. No, so we have customers, we have engineers, and no. So I wouldn't say I don't work for the hybrid cloud team. Uh-huh. I'm an extension of it.
Okay.
Through a different mechanism. So about 3 years ago, I was on a team at Rackspace that kind of revolutionized how people consume cloud, and it's when we released a product called Rack Connect. And this Rack Connect product kind of allowed you to tie dedicated hosting into your cloud. And that was kind of, the first step of really getting customers to start using cloud. So now we have another team that is purely building hybrid cloud functionality. So we're talking about public clouds, we're talking about private clouds, we're talking about bare metal, we're talking about dedicated, and using all those as one system. So that's a pure product team that is building that product. And what I'm doing now is the deployment and the ability to consume OpenStack has become so much easier through what Red Hat is doing with RDO, what Mirantis is doing with Fuel, even what Rackspace is doing with Rackspace Private Cloud. It's easier to deploy these clouds, but the problem that we've seen is once these clouds are deployed, how do you actually consume? What do you do with them? How do you build on them? How do you maximize their value? And it's not just OpenStack. A lot of these principles actually are the same across all clouds. So my job is to go out, talk with the community, figure out what they're doing, what they're missing, and how they want to consume cloud.
Nice. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Now, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about project versus product. Mm-hmm. So tonight is, I believe, the quote-unquote official birthday party for OpenStack, the third birthday party here tonight. And we're seeing a lot of, there's been a lot of, I think we've done it here on the podcast before, some things about the Grizzly release, and Havana's going to be the next release. But Mark, tell us a little bit about, because like you said, the foundation is less than a year old. So how did it get started? How did it kind of evolve? A little bit of, behind the scenes of,
Sure.
How does something like this get going?
Yeah. Well, I think that, one of the interesting things about pulling together the foundation, and we spent, probably at least 9 months, if not more, really kind of putting it together in terms of the bylaws and getting the initial backers and figuring out the right structure. I think that one of the interesting things that we were trying to do was actually not change a lot. It was actually trying to sort of transplant something that, we had a dedicated team within Rackspace that was managing, these community events, the summits, and helping to grow OpenStack from a community investment perspective. And, we weren't really trying to break that model in terms of the way the technical governance worked. We're really just trying to transplant that into a new legal entity. So a lot of people sort of ask, what are you trying to fix? And it wasn't really about fixing something. It was about sort of taking OpenStack to its logical home, legally speaking, in terms of this nonprofit that could be people from all across the world could get involved and become members. And we ended up working with a number of different people from companies that signed a letter of intent, effectively, that we published on the wiki. So everything we did was based on, an open process, putting drafts of the bylaws on the wiki and having mailing list discussions, having meetups, and we ultimately formed a drafting committee to kind of finalize a lot of those details. So, I don't know if that's interesting to people. You said you want to hear behind the scenes.
Sure.
I can't say every meeting hammering out bylaws is the most exciting, but it is really important work. And so that's why we took the time, I think, to do it right and really preserve a lot of those important values of the OpenStack community. In particular, the technical meritocracy. So the idea that technical decisions are made by technical people that are the leaders in the community from a technical perspective, and each of the sub-projects within OpenStack is led by a PTL or project technical lead, which are elected by the contributors to those projects. So all those things we've been doing for many years and really just kind of codified that in the bylaws when we put it all together.
Sure. And so before I ask the question, I'll just say, probably three ways a project could go. One is the project is kind of released out there and nothing happens.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
It just kind of goes away into the ether, right?
Yeah.
Another one is it just kind of moves along and everything's cool. But then, kind of a third one, and I think that probably this category is you've seen explosive growth. And when you see growth, how do you manage something like that in both the project and the product of how do you ramp up fast enough? How do you, meet the demands fast enough?
Well, I think there's a couple of key decisions or actions that were taken over the last couple of years to kind of keep up with the growth. One is that from a project governance perspective with those project technical leads, we're able to kind of take Nova, the OpenStack Compute project, and kind of start to break it apart so we can bring in more leaders from throughout the community to kind of break the work down, and so that we have these kind of smaller teams. They're still quite large by open source project standards, but you have people that are elected that have domain expertise in storage, for example. So the block storage project was a capability that was built into Nova, the compute project, early on, and then as it became more sophisticated, it made sense to break that out into the Sender project. And so then folks that really had a domain expertise in block storage came in to start running that. So that was part of it. So you now have a lot more PTLs, and that kind of distributes the workload, and you have these the folks that have the most expertise making those decisions. And I think the other thing that's really important is that we've continued to have our summits every 6 months, and so while of course things go on every single day in IRC and the mailing list and all kinds of online forums, it's really important to be together in person twice a year. And a lot of other communities and companies have like annual events, and that's kind of the industry standard. But I think that meeting twice a year, although it certainly takes a lot of time and resources to manage, and now we're going to Hong Kong, which is a big endeavor in November. It's worth it, and it's really important to get together face to face. And it does keep any sort of big disagreements or big feuds from boiling up too big, because when you're looking at someone across the table from you, you have a couple of pints, tends to kind of wash away anything that you might have gotten in terms of getting riled up online.
Sure.
So those are two things I think have helped.
And from a community standpoint, one thing that I felt's been like really excellent for OpenStack has been the evolution of how the technical committee has actually been put together. So early on, there was a project policy board who was responsible for the technical governance of OpenStack. And then as the foundation was actually built, it turned into a technical committee, which was a board of directors and a technical committee, which was project technical leads plus elected community members. So even though you weren't directly leading a project, if you were seen as a valuable contributor in the community, you were able to be part of these conversations and help drive the overall strategy of the particular project. And with the 6-month cadence, you've actually seen that the technical community is actually going under like a version 2.0 excuse me, version 2.0 refresh, where you're seeing more projects come in, you're seeing more project technical leads, and instead of them just being directly assigned seats, is actually now 13 community elected individuals that are pretty much brought up. So you kind of have the best of breed. The technical meritocracy piece of it really rings true, because at any point in time, if you feel that the person leading the project or really making a lot of waves isn't driving in the right direction, you're completely free to vote them out and move someone into the spot that you have more faith in overall.
Gotcha. And so let me ask you this, because I keep saying project, and that's been kind of a focus here, but I think this is something that's been on my mind for a while now, but I think it kind of really blew up over a couple different blogs and Twitter stuff recently, of this concept of project versus product versus a service versus a service provider. There's almost 4 different areas, right?
Sure.
And an OpenStack almost gets, in some ways, associated with all 4 of them at the exact same time.
Yeah. It's a communication challenge. And I think,
because it's like AWS versus OpenStack, or
right.
All these other different things in the community of how do you do something like that? Because at the end of the day, it does mean multiple things to multiple people.
Yeah, I think in particular with open source, especially something as broadly applicable as cloud computing, there are so many different companies that need that type of capability in one form or another, whether they're going to build their own private cloud or they're going to consume services from a public cloud. And in some cases, maybe they don't even realize that that's powered by OpenStack or what's powering it. So it's so broadly applicable that it's really hard to just put it in one neat box. And unfortunately, that's just kind of, I guess, human instinct to want to say, this versus that.
I want to put a label on it.
Yeah, and then the draw to put a label on it seems to be to immediately compare it with something else, and then say there's a war, and people love the kind of tribalism, and I guess it sells newspapers, if newspapers are still around. I don't know, but it certainly drives page views,
yes.
And that's fine. But it isn't it's never quite as simple as the headlines make it out to be.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have a really neat perspective on that at Rackspace, just because being one of the co-founders of OpenStack, a lot of people immediately make the assumption that every single thing that happens in OpenStack, Rackspace immediately productizes and makes available to consume, and that's not the case. So it's a conversation that happens way more often than I really prefer. But when it comes down to it, there's a new release of OpenStack that comes out. There's a ton of press around it. People go and read about all the new awesome features, and they immediately want to start using those features, if they're a customer of Rackspace or if they're a consumer of OpenStack anywhere. And the fact of the matter is, these projects, they are so bleeding edge, you still have to actually go in and figure out how do you actually productize this and turn it into something that multiple people can use. So that's an area where you start seeing a lot of questions of like, all right, well, we have multiple versions of OpenStack. How do they play nice with each other? How do we productize these? What's the best way to use it? What's the wrong way to use it? What do we expose? What do we not expose? So that conversation does come up a lot, but as Mark mentioned earlier, with the modularization of OpenStack, you don't have to be a domain expert in all things OpenStack to be a contributor or to help productize something. If you're a storage guy, well, you're going to be interested in probably what Swift or what Cinder is doing. If you're a networking guy, you're going to be interested in what Neutron is doing, etc. So I think when you start looking at that, it really helps bring maturity to OpenStack and stability across anyone that wants to take it and actually build a platform cloud out of it.
Yeah, and if you think about it, this is not really new territory. If you look at Android, for example, there's always a lot of interest and excitement when there's a new version of Android announced. But typically, you can't buy a phone running that version for 3 or 6 months, and that kind of breaks the mold of what people, I guess, expect. But it's just kind of the way open source works. It's an open book. And that has all these incredible advantages in terms of anyone that wants to get involved in building the software can, and there's no secrets and everybody knows what's going on. But if you're much further downstream and you're wanting to implement it, you're wanting to put it in production, then some of that can appear like noise, or you're getting a little information that you're not used to from the sort of traditional packaged proprietary software kind of model of, hey, I'm announcing this, here are all the new features, you can buy it today. Mm-hmm. And so, I think those are just some side effects of how open source works, but it's absolutely the best model for innovation. And I think the open development model, which is part of the 4 opens that we really believe in within the OpenStack community, open source is only one of those. Open development, open design, and open community are the other 3. And open design is a lot about what happens at the summits, where there are discussions about what should come in the next feature. And, because OpenStack has so much interest these days, we certainly will have reporters that might come to the summits, and that's fine, But if you hear a discussion in a room that, hey, maybe we should have this feature in 6 months, even if it does come in 6 months, then it's productized a few months later, it gets a little bit, it can be a source of confusion for people, but we do try to, make it as clear as we can from the foundation perspective when we're communicating about where the direction of the project is going.
Sure. Now, so we've mentioned it a couple times, but so the next summit is actually in Hong Kong.
Yes, very excited about that.
So tell me a little bit about how that came to be and the decision to go global and why Hong Kong.
Sure. So, yes, it's November 5th through the 8th, so I'll get my plug in here. OpenStack.org/summit is always the right link. It'll always point to the latest summit. But, I think that, it's very important to us. We made a decision pretty early on that there would be a summit outside the U.S., in the not-too-distant future, and we started to look for opportunities to host that in either Europe or Asia. And when we found an amazing venue in Hong Kong that can hold a tremendous number of people. We expect this to be by far the largest summit we've ever had. And if you look at the excitement and the users and the contributions coming from throughout Asia, and China in particular, I think that was one of the things that made Hong Kong really appealing. In fact, there are more visitors that come to the OpenStack.org website from Beijing than any other city in the world, which is kind of a mind-blowing stat to me. And certainly we considered possibly doing it in mainland China. I think Hong Kong's was a little bit easier for us to work with in terms of our crew that's mostly based in the U.S.
Sure.
And we worked with some good firms over in Hong Kong that are helping us kind of plan that out. But we do expect to have an event in Europe next year, and for us, one of the things that's kind of a misnomer, people sometimes think of this as either a Asian specific summit, but it's actually a global summit,
right? Or
they think this is the first international summit. In reality, they've all been international summits. They happen to have been in the U.S., but we've had people from all over the world coming to them. So every summit is absolutely the real official global worldwide summit. We just pick different locations, and I think there'll be some definitely unique talks and users that we'll be able to learn more from in Hong Kong.
Cool. Now, going back almost pre-foundation for a second. So you've been there since the start. Is there anything, like if you took a do-over, right? Is there anything that going back in time that maybe would be different going forward, lessons learned? Or is there even things that you were like, oh, we nailed this?
Yeah.
So kind of pros and cons either way, right?
Yeah, I would give a few examples. I mean, I think in terms of, we were just talking about going to Hong Kong. I think that the amount of interest and the amount of sort of local grassroots organization that's happened in over 100 countries has been phenomenal. And I think if I could do anything over again, it would be maybe to try to pull off an international summit sooner, or to do more to help all those groups. But in spite of the fact that we didn't have enough resources to really be on an airplane every day and be all over the world.
Except for Wayne.
Yeah, well, Wayne. We've got Wayne is, and you've got Jen Gates, the chief travel officer over there. So, yeah, I mean, I think I'm just so amazed at how much passion and contributions are coming from, China and other areas. So, probably I would spend more time in Asia, in the early days if I could do it over again. But yeah, no regrets though. Really, I mean, I think the results are pretty phenomenal. And in terms of key decisions, I look at a couple of things as being really critical to the kind of getting off on the right foot. One was the choice of the Apache license. So we looked at all the different popular licenses out there, and actually Adam Jacob over at OpsCode, the Chef founder. He was one of the first people that I met with who basically said, look, forget all these other options. Apache 2.0 is the way to go. I've looked at it all. Here's the reasons. And, I was convinced, and we went that direction. I think the reason why that's critical is it's very, it really builds the biggest tent. It's just a very permissible license. It's very business friendly. And I think, related to that, in terms of early decisions, we decided to go out and court an ecosystem of companies and commercial interest, and we didn't see commercial interest as conflicting with open source values. Mm-hmm. And Apache kind of is that proof point of that. And there are a lot of we're standing on the shoulders of giants in terms of the work the Apache Software Foundation has done and the Apache license itself. So I think those were some critical investments or decisions really that kind of got things off to a strong start as businesses saw that this was a path towards helping customers, and the license was something that they understood, mm-hmm. so that their team of lawyers didn't have to go spend weeks poring over some custom license and looking for every
why
little,
reinvent the wheel.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was like, oh well, we know this license.
Sure.
We already spent the weeks poring over it, 5 years ago, and now that's done. And then I think investing in kind of community building and marketing to generate awareness is not something that a lot of open source projects have done, and we did that early on. And, all those things together kind of gave it a little spark.
Nice. And quick note for any new listeners, we did a podcast, a couple months ago called, I want to say Open Source 101, if you go search for the title. But it is actually a pretty much in-depth, detail dive into a lot of the different definitions and licenses that are out there. So it would certainly help some people if they're wondering why.
Cool. Yeah,
that's
good.
That's definitely one to go listen to.
I'm glad you're helping people, understand some of the nuances, because it does matter some of those decisions. If you're thinking about opening up a new project, I also think. Sorry, just to get on a rant here.
Go ahead, please. Stepping on the soapbox. Here he goes.
The fact that having users involved and not just vendors is just absolutely critical. And obviously, Rackspace is a commercial company, but not a software company in the sense of trying to sell software. We're just really looking to build software to consume for other types of services. And then NASA, being a government agency, those were people that were sort of in the traditional sense. People talk about open source being scratching the itch of a developer. In this case, cloud computing is bigger than what a hobbyist might want to have on their laptop. So, it tends to be led a little bit more by commercial entities. But these were two organizations that weren't looking to have an enterprise version or hold back features. They wanted everything to be 100% open, and so they didn't have there wasn't an inherent conflict that I think sometimes creeps in other communities, where trying to get the next wave of companies to commit, if they're nervous that something's going to be held back or there's a weird conflict of interest, that can hinder that. And I think that not having that was really helpful early on to get people to join it.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, kind of shift gears completely for a second. So Wayne, you're doing something really cool.
You think so?
There's this Unlocked.io roadshow. I don't know if I'm calling it what it needs to be called. But
That's fair. That's fair.
I took a look at the slides, and so this is kind of a roadshow. You going, quite frankly, around the world, but it isn't pushing a product per se. It seems to be more about an education on DevOps and kind of these cloud area applications and tools and workload development. So tell everyone a little bit about that project as well in conjunction with everything else.
Sure. So one of the great things about working at Rackspace is we're very open with everything we do. And one of the reasons that this Unlocked Roadshow was actually born was it actually came from an internal training initiative that we had. And what actually happened, one of the core values at Rackspace is full transparency. So full transparency, we had customers that were coming to us saying, we want to do X, Y, and Z in the cloud. And we had a handful of people that knew what that meant. And that did not actually provide a fanatical experience for anyone. So we were actually challenged by our leadership that said, all right, well, we need more people that know this stuff. So we've actually built this training initiative called Cloud Savvy. And Cloud Savvy, it's been going on for almost a year now, and we've been tasked to elevate the cloud knowledge of a bunch of Rackspace employees around the world. Well, we had really good results from that, and we realized we're sitting on a gold mine of information. Well, it made no sense to keep it internal, so we went to leadership and said, we want to take this out to the world. We want to give it to the masses. But we don't want to push Rackspace on people because this isn't only about Rackspace. This is about DevOps. This is about cloud, how to consume. A lot of people know what cloud is. They know why cloud is important, but then they don't know how to implement it properly. And that's what Unlocked is really all about. It's the how function of this. So, a lot of people debate DevOps is a cultural shift. We can't tell you step 1 through 5 of how to become a DevOps shop, but what we can do is we can talk to you about the tooling. We can talk to you about the methodologies. We can talk to you about monitoring. We can talk to you about automating all of the things. We can do all that for you. That's all stuff that we can help you do. But all we're doing is we're opening the door and allowing you to walk through it. So if you want to be a DevOps shop, if you want to consume cloud a certain way, we're here to help. And once again, kind of going back, this is education that doesn't matter where you are. If you want to use this on Azure, on Google Cloud, on Amazon, on Rackspace Cloud, it doesn't matter. These lessons work across everything. But the real big piece of it is we want to talk about application fit, because I think that that's an area that a lot of people are not really fully understanding where cloud's really going to help them. You have tons of private cloud providers or public cloud providers in the world, but not every application is built or made for the public cloud. Sometimes you need private cloud, sometimes you need dedicated servers, sometimes you need bare metal performance, and it's really finding the right fit. So we want to help anyone in the world do that. And the platform that's going to make that truly possible is OpenStack, because you can run OpenStack anywhere. You're going to have public cloud providers. You're going to have private cloud versions of OpenStack. You're going to have the Nova bare metal driver that's going to actually give you true performance, of a dedicated box for specialized workloads. So we want to bring all that together and help educate people to really use and consume cloud to the best of their ability. And that's what Unlocked is really all about.
Yeah, no, I'm actually glad you said that, because for me, in my personal experiences talking to customers, it all comes down to workload and workload profiling and figuring out which ones are a good fit and which ones aren't. And I think too many are under the impression that, all right, I want to take everything ka-chunk and cloudify it, right?
It's a full-length mythology, right?
Right. But I do think that is an educational process that the entire industry is going through. And unfortunately, it's one of those, maybe in hindsight, that probably should have happened a long time ago.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think everyone is kind of, what happened is you almost reached that point where it was like, hey, why isn't this being adopted more or adopted faster? And even though everything seems to be going, certainly if you're on the inside of it, very, very fast, at times it's like, well, why isn't it going faster?
Right.
And a lot of times it's because the customer's just quite frankly not understanding.
Yep. And
exactly
actually,
what's going on.
going back to one of Mark's points, just about, hindsight's always 20/20, right? But when OpenStack was first born, I was lucky enough to be part of a team that deployed OpenStack very early on at the Bear Design Summit, and there wasn't a lot of
Brave man.
I was just going to say, wow.
It was.
Thanks for sticking with us through the tough times.
Actually, huge shout out to Jordan Rinke. This would not have happened without his brilliant mind. Brett Pye had asked us to set up a cloud 3 days before the Build a Cloud Day on Dell prototype gear. All right. So as it wasn't already hard enough.
Yeah.
But what was really...
Good shout out for Brett for believing anything's possible.
Oh, yes. One of the unsung heroes and OpenStack founders, absolutely. But there wasn't a lot of user documentation, and that's something that, I'm traditionally an ops guy, so I was very beleaguered when, it came to deploying this first time, and, now you see OpenStack operation manuals, you see hundreds of pages of documentation. If I was OpenStack Foundation, I would put a lot of money into cloning and Gentle. We need like 15 of her.
Can't comment on any secret projects we may have.
But she's done a fantastic job of getting people to that point. And, as I mentioned, now OpenStack, it doesn't take days to deploy anymore. You can have full clouds in anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes. Full operation. You're good to go. But then once again, it gets to the point, all right, we have this cloud, you need to deploy something on it. You have these resources, what's next? And, that's where kind of the whole education piece comes full circle, is, we want to help people get there, but then do the right thing and the best thing for their business.
I understand. Well, I think that's a great stopping point, guys. So, Mark, Wayne, where can everyone find out more about you or the projects you're working on?
Well, you're welcome to follow me on Twitter. I'm Sparky Collier on Twitter, which is just a hat tip to my late Great Dane, who was actually the original Sparky Collier, but now people have tagged me with that. But I'm on Twitter, and then of course, OpenStack.org is where we try to get as much information as we can, including about the summits and all that good stuff, and where you can get involved.
All right. Once again, follow me on Twitter. I'm just at Wayne Walls. Sorry, I don't have such an awesome story, heartfelt story like Mark here, but that's my Twitter handle. Unlock.io is where you can find all the roadshow dates for where we're going to be going, and if there's any new topics that you want to have covered, we have suggestion pages. So if we're not coming to a city near you, please let us know. We'd love to bring the show to you. Then also a shout out to our developer blog, developer.rackspace.com. It's a new blog that we have built up. We're catering to developers. We're trying to really get the platform solid and have people build on them. So go out there, check them out, and build away.
Awesome. All right, everyone. If you like the show, please tell a friend or leave us a review on iTunes. You can follow us on Twitter at thecloudcast.net or on the web at thecloudcast.net, where you can find links to everything Cloudcast. Thanks for listening.